Good morning, everybody. It's my great pleasure to be here today. I guess I come to Bangalore probably more often than any other place in the world, actually, although I travel a lot because I'm also serving on International Advisory Board. I am Bangalore. So great to be here for another occasion. So I'm not going to actually talk about how to do it or what to do it in terms of the topic today. What I want to do is really set the tone for you to think about why do we even need to think about it? What are the reasons and what are the compelling justifications for us to think about how we need to do what we need to do on MBA education? So first I'm going to set the context. I'm going to talk about some of the curricular pedagogic deficits as well discussed by leading scholars in the field. And then we're going to talk about some of the contextual issues that we want to look at and then finish with some final thoughts. So setting the context. Things are changing really, really fast, and there's no doubt about it. Whether it's economic development or it's a political scenes, I think we can all admit it is changing at a pace that we have never seen before, and it's affecting businesses, governments, industries, and all sectors of what we're dealing with. So whether we're talking about Industry 4.0, automation, digitalization, or talking about actually human factors as what is happening in Japan with the Society 5.0, we're living in the world of VUCA. I'm sure you heard the word of VUCA many, many times. So volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think that's something that we want to keep in mind as we go through this morning and as well as next 2 days of session. So I typed this word, will machines, in my Google search. And even before I complete my search words, Google shows me the options. And they include, will machines take over the world? Will machines replace humans? Will machines replace doctors? Will machines take my job? Sometimes, actually, I think Google is smarter than myself. Do you agree? They will actually give me a better way of searching what I actually had in mind. This is the world we live in. So Terminator 3, that used to be a pure fiction. Now we're talking about this artificial intelligence, machine learning, robots, and everything. Chatbox. We have many different chat groups at AIM. And if I give a very short answer, like yes, go ahead, that's a great idea. And if I don't elaborate, my colleagues tend to say, I don't want to talk to robots. It's a chat box talk. Give me more elaborate answers. But that's the reality we live in. And I find this quite amusing. Look at this, how the Brazil is taking off in 2009. In 2013, the same Economist Journal has a cover page that says, has Brazil blown it? You know these two guys, right? Actually, I'm from South Korea originally. I was grown up there, finished the university. But my dad is actually from North Korea. He came down south. So I follow what's happening there with a great interest. But you never know how things will go in which direction. Oil prices, all these things. Digital transformation and automation are the main reason just over half of the Fortune 500 companies, this is really frightening, have disappeared since the year 2000. And that's something that we see all the time. It's changing so fast and in a direction at a rate that we had never seen before. So all these changes, what it means is that we will see a lot of disruption. And it's going to disrupt industries such as technology, media, retail, all, as expected. But you see that education is number 6. Have you already experienced some disruption in what you do on a day-to-day basis in your business school? Are we anticipating disruption? What kind of disruption? How are we ready to deal with these disruptions? This is why we are here. So self-driving cars, has anybody been in one of those? It's really scary. If you're not used to the idea, I'm a really, really horrible driver, but still, it's scary to be in one of these things. And what's the implication of self-driving cars in our daily life in terms of different industries? Of course, there are obvious sectors: automobile industry, repairs, public transportation, taxis. That's very easy to imagine. You can also look at adjacent industries. For example, package delivery, hotels, airlines, parking garages. What are we going to do with all these parking garages? Some cities, as you can see here, almost 1/3 of the city space are dedicated to parking. Barcelona, for example, developed a really cool app that will control the traffic problem significantly less severely because they now have AI who will direct people to the right parking space. Some unrelated industries will also be affected: retail, energy, media, entertainment. And then surprising places like healthcare, law enforcement. Perhaps we don't need as many policemen going around doing traffic or giving parking tickets and so on and so forth. But how are we preparing ourselves for all these things is the topics that we want to talk about. If you look at the management education, all the things have been changing so fast. We still teach marketing. We still teach finance. We teach human resources, organizational behaviors, operational management. Why are we all insisting upon dealing with this subject in these functional areas the way we've been teaching for how many years? How are we actually incorporating, for example, data science and analytics into our curriculum? How do we deal with the fact that now the world can be much more effectively dealt with in a multidisciplinary, cross-functional ways? I remember when I was studying my PhD program 30-some years ago, our professors really discouraged anybody who wanted to do interdisciplinary research because that was looked down upon. If you want to become a serious scholar, you have to find a very narrow, minuscule subject and dig deeper. If you want to go across different functional areas, we are discouraged. But now it is becoming much more acceptable. But how are we actually reflecting that in our teaching, in our education? Are we actually doing it in a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary way that actually incorporates a lot of things that are happening in the real world? So soft skills. I have a couple of other slides related to this, but we hear a lot that soft skills are becoming more and more important. But for the most part, at most business schools, soft skills are on the side. It's add-on. We don't really teach this subject. How do we actually incorporate what is valued by industries and recruiters and employers? I find this really amusing, actually. If you look at the jobs that are going to be automated by 2025, these are all telemarketers, tax preparers, timing device assemblers, and so on and so forth. If you look at this size, mental health social workers, I like this one, where is a makeup artist. I always wanted to make makeup artist. These are less likely to replace. But look at this, lawyers, judges, even judges. You know why judges are likely to be replaced? Probably it's not so severe in India, but where the racial issues are very high, for example, places like America, they've done some testing and they found that people actually trust artificial intelligence program judges' judgment better with more trust on simple issues because they don't think they're being biased because they are black, because they are Hispanic, and so on and so forth. So this is unprecedented in terms of how the world is going to be changed. Yes, we're going to lose a lot of jobs, no doubt about it. We're going to lose a lot of jobs. A lot of jobs will be replaced by machines. But there will be new jobs. And how are we dealing with this? How are we thinking about our education, especially in the business school setting? How are we preparing our new graduates to be ready for the 21st century rather than preparing for a traditional kind of jobs? There are many schools who excel in accounting field, for example, but a lot of accountants are going to be replaced because it's a simple mechanical test that can be easily programmed. So then what do we teach? How do we make humans unique and irreplaceable? What is it about our education that will actually make that happen? This is fun, right? All these kids with the 200 million assets, 100 million, 60 million, 18 months. Money is not everything. But these kids figured it out on their own. What do we teach these people? You know, my professors say when they go into the lecture room, start teaching cases or stuff, somebody will actually start Googling, and these kids can filter information out 10 times faster than we can. And before they actually finish their sentence, they will actually ask a question because the Google asks them to talk about, gives them ideas about something much smarter than sometimes what our professors are prepared for. They will talk about something that just happened yesterday in the news that our professors not even aware of. And they'll ask those questions at the last minute. Completely justified. So instead of telling and teaching the facts, perhaps when you think about what we need to teach is slightly different than how we went through the educational program. So let's look at some of the criticisms. Before that, I want to talk about this as an example of how sometimes what we teach our graduates, what graduates actually want to learn or the students want to learn when they're in the program, and what the companies are doing about meeting those expectations. Not every company can do that very well. Google is one of those companies doing relatively better than some other companies. I'm sure there are a lot of companies in India, for example, you can share examples with. So this is what Google expects from their graduate. They want to be a good coach, empowering team, express interest, productive, result-oriented, good communicator, and so on and so forth. If you look at all of these things except one, they're all kind of soft skill issues. There's one here, number 8, has important technical skills that help him, her advise a team. Everything else is kind of people skill, team skill, and so on and so forth. If you ask the new generation of the learners what they expect from us, meaning the companies, they want, and as well as the schools, they want to learn on the go. We actually at the International Board of AICSB, we actually invited somebody who is developing an app to dissect all our teaching materials into 2-minute videos, lectures, exercises, and so on and so forth. And all of us in Innovation Committee actually sat and went through the exercise. And it was quite engaging, quite interesting. But you know, some of us were very skeptical. How do we actually dissect your 90-minute, 80-minute, or even 60-minute lecture into 2-minute segment? That's daunting. But that's what kids these days want. They want to learn on the go. They want everything to be really a sound bite, anywhere, anytime, any device, engaging, attention-grabbing, very much of an entertainment factor. You know, just because you have a good content, it's not going to satisfy their needs. They want us to be able to hold their attention. Using multimedia, it has to be relevant, it has to be immediately applicable. A typical comment I get from millennials, I want to make a difference. Have you heard that? Do you hear the same thing? I want to make a difference. I want to have an impactful life. But they will not stay in the same company more than 2-3 years because they're impatient. So what do we teach these people for them to have a fulfilling, satisfying learning experience? So this is what Google say from their perspective. People look for meaning in their work. People want to know what's happening in their environment. They care. They say they care. People want to have some ability to shape their environment. So this is the impact part. As a result, Google has cultivated a creative and passionate workforce that holds key to companies' innovation. So I highlighted some of the keywords. But these are very, very different kind of mantra than what I heard when I went to school. And how often do we train or retrain ourselves? And how often do we train and retain our professors? Because what we learn, obviously, when we are at school are very different from what the millennials want to learn and think about. So perhaps we can ask ourselves some questions. Have we responded to changes in the business and economic environments the way that keep us relevant to what's happening? Have we created enough new knowledge or tailored our offerings to meet the needs? And I think this is partially why you see a lot of new players in the market. Because some of us are very good at continuing to do what we have learned, what we have been doing. But then there are new players in the marketplace, in our environment, who recognize these gaps. We have adapted well to our own VUCA environment. Have we challenged ourselves in terms of what structure, what processes, what governance, what collaborations do we need to be thinking about? So on the way here, I was talking to Dan in the car, and I showed this picture, and I said, do you know what's wrong with this picture? And he was trying to come up with an answer. Does anybody have an answer what I am very unhappy about this picture? Thank you. So I was looking for all the distinguished authors who have criticized business school in recent years. And all these people are the authors of the books. And obviously, actually, some of you probably read how Martin Parker's views have been criticized. But the point is, why aren't women speaking up? I don't know. I'm speaking to myself as well. Perhaps this is something to do with our education and training. But the point I'm trying to make here is that there have been lots of criticisms of what we are doing wrong as a business school, as a leaders of business education. Perhaps Oskawa's word about education, maybe this is something we want to think about it again. Education is an admirable thing, but it is well to remember from time to time that nothing that is worth knowing can be taught. That's a frightening thought, isn't it? Obviously, that's him. So we don't have to take that on board in a serious way. But it is true. Almost everything we can teach is in Google now. Almost everything we can teach, they can find in MOOCs, free. So what value are we providing to our students? So if I can borrow Greek philosophy, perhaps the way we can think about pedagogy is how we generate knowledge, how do we actually practice, and they need to be in tandem, and that's what we can teach. So one area within the university or academic setting that does very well, in my view, is a medical school. So they do research, but they practice, right? And that's what they teach. So sometimes I think the challenges that I feel about the business school setting is often we are being criticized for living in ivory tower. We often being criticized for doing research no industry or no business people want to read. You can ask top CEOs, when was the last time you read academic journal article? He just made a face. Did you see that? Maybe sometimes they read Harvard Business Review, right? But that's not, if you ask academic, a serious scholar, that's not what they call research. That's not what is normally valued in the business school setting. So how do we bridge the gap? Or we may even ask, is bridging the gap an important task for us to think about? So Peter Rand's Howard Thomas published a book in 2016. I think they have a nice way of describing why the contextual intelligence is lacking in this setting. So no balance between research and teaching excellence. How many of you actually learned in a proper way, however you want to define it, how to teach? Most of our training is how to do research. Number 2, distance between professors and businessmen or the practices. Professors' discomfort in deliberating open-ended dilemmas. We like to give something concrete. We don't like to have like open-ended dilemmas. Generalized teaching materials with a little tailor-making to specific learning context. Predominance of axiomatic bodies of knowledge. All these are issues that we want to think about, and I won't go into all of the details. This is fascinating. This is from Stanford Graduate School of Business. I don't know if anybody could actually do that, but do we need to think about our method and wares? Yes, I don't think there is any doubt about it. So this is an example that we see many schools are now merging or integrating technology and education. That you see that a lot. Berkeley launched a very, very ambitious undergraduate program where students will be doing business degree and engineering degree simultaneously, and they have to finish in 4 years. They're not giving any waivers whatsoever because they realize when they merge together, they truly can be something really uniquely awesome. This is an example of Oxford Science School. It's really a unique program. If you're interested, you can read about it a little bit. It's bringing together diverse audiences, diverse stakeholders to solve a real-world, multidisciplinary, interfunctional issues, and they start with a wicked problem to solve. It's a very good example. But our curriculum, our setup, our structure is not always well suited to be able to deal with this. Our curriculum, if you look at it, for the most part, still evolve around dealing with each of the functional areas. So a fundamental disruption is needed. This is the kind of conclusion I'm trying to draw here in terms of what we teach as well as how we teach. Okay? So the first question is, how do we prepare our students for the fourth industrial revolution? How do we engage students? But also, how do we engage our faculty? How do we incentivize? How do we motivate our faculty to do something different? They are all screaming, you're asking me to publish, you're asking me to publish in a 4-star journal article, but you want me to teach you something differently? You want me to collaborate with 3 other people to teach one session? I sometimes don't know how to answer that because we all are struggling to make everything work at the same time. And we're not actually very well set up to be able to handle these kind of challenges. How do we make the best use of technology? And I think technology will play an important role. But it is not just because we can do online sessions. It's not just because we sign up to have a MOOC. I think it needs to be playing a much more integral role in terms of what we teach and how we teach. But since we ourselves are not very well trained, sometimes it's a daunting task. Sometimes it's a really challenging because initial investment cost is quite high. And we all trying to, balance the budget and do everything else, and it is a challenge we have to solve. So new pedagogy initiatives should be set in the context of changing environment of business education. So we probably need a new mindset to be able to tackle this challenge. New knowledge and skills to focus on new behaviors for a personalized education through collaboration and teamwork using multiple devices and platforms whilst measuring impact and developing the right assessment tools. There are a lot of keywords there. But what I feel after writing this down is none of these are the things that I'm trained for. It's not very common for business schools or business educators to think about what we do on a daily basis along this line with this mindset. I think what we need is a holistic approach, and this is what I call 6 Ps. We want to think about what is the purpose or mission of our school. I don't believe every school has to do the same thing because our mission is different. There are new players, the kind of players that we used to think about is limited. I was just talking to, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. I'm so sorry. Joel, okay. I met him in Singapore a few years ago, and he was just describing what he's doing now. It's fascinating. But I actually thought about something like that some time ago. It would be really cool for some of the new programs I'm developing. I'm not on his payroll or anything, so don't get me wrong. But what he's trying to do is trying to pull all different talents out there who could make contribution toward business school education and trying to match supply and demand in a way. Is that right? Okay, in a short description. A lot of online players 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we completely poo-pooed. But now there are some serious players, and students' experience, obviously, at some of these schools are really, really good. So how do we actually think about business schools are now competing not only with the other business schools, but with the corporate universities, with the consultants, and with a lot of entrepreneurs who have an idea about how to do things differently, and many of them using technology. Participants, who are our participants? I don't know if anybody has read a book called Sorry for Being Late. But the whole idea of continuous education, adult education, learning never stops, I think it cannot be more true. Just because you went through university, master's and PhD or even postdoc, it doesn't make you immune from the fact that there are so much more to learn, and it will never stop because there are new things coming out all the time. And how do we incorporate into what we do is a question. Product, what is our product? Is it degrees in a traditional sense? Now we have a micro degrees. I just heard about nano degrees. Did you hear about that? Professors. So there are different kinds of professors, right? And the traditional sense of who is the most qualified, distinguished professors perhaps need to be revisited. I'm not trying to play down or discount everything we have, but I think this is a time for us to think about a lot of things, the way we do things in view of the fact that we live in a very different world. Partnership, going beyond the traditional collaboration. Perhaps our partners can be found in areas that we haven't normally think about. And this sometimes I think a lot of people talk about. Let's not just talk about pedagogical issues, but when it comes to adult learning, there are a lot of new things coming out that I think would be quite helpful even in the business education. So again, in a very similar way, we can think about the facts, the knowledge, theories, and so on and so forth, but actually doing, practicing, and also being the values and attitudes. And I think that is equally important. And if you think about a lot of criticisms that our top school MBA graduates get into trouble with, I think that's becoming even more important. So there are a lot of, I think Amit earlier talked about the schools focusing on cases, schools focusing on lectures, or even experiential learning and projects and so forth. But perhaps that's something that we want to revisit. And these are my way of sort of grouping, if you will, some of the initiatives that we can think about. What are some of the innovations that we want to incorporate into our curriculum? Many of you probably are familiar with design thinking. Practicality, I mentioned earlier, can we start with a wicked problem? In other words, can we start with a problem to solve rather than doing it in a conventional way? Deconstructing. This is a Chinese character, or Japanese say Ma. I don't know if you're familiar with the Picasso's bull. He depicted this bull in many different ways, and each of the bulls can be actually analyze in a different way. So maybe, visual spatial intelligence. In fact, many people will say the smartest people, most intelligent people often have the best ability to have information on visual and spatial ways. Delivery. So using technology, the mix of faculty, I'm one of those people who like to have a mix between traditional academic and the practitioner teaching it together. If I had my way and resources and bandwidth, I would prefer at AIM we have that kind of teaching in almost every class as much as possible, so that we can actually teach our students something relevant and something meaningful, something they will be able to utilize, but grounded. So, finishing thoughts. There are a lot of criticisms. That perhaps we're losing some of the relevance that we once had, if we had. We are operating in the VUCA world. Concurrently, business schools are also caught in currents of changes. Questions of governance, structure, funding, market fit, substance are swarming us today more than ever before. So perhaps we can think about adapting something like the old Facebook motto, move fast or break things. I think sometimes we cannot have everything in place before we make a move. Sometimes you just have to jump in and try. I think the only thing that we cannot afford to do at this point is to maintain the status quo. Sort of hiding under the blanket and pretend this is not happening. Somehow we can continue to do what we have done for last 100 years or so. So hopefully the next 2 days with many of our distinguished speakers, we can find some answers that will be relevant to our context, our own business school, our programs, and we can walk away by the end of tomorrow with some ideas as to how we can deal with the business education in the 21st century. That's it. Thank you very much.